Well, I'm not sure if we're live or not. Maybe producer, can you send me a thumbs up so that I know whether we're working? Excellent. Well, here it is, the 29th of December, 2020, and we're in quite a predicament, not only here in Canada, but around the world as we face this COVID dilemma. But the question I want to talk about today is democracy, and is it working, and is it functional? And I have to say it's very dysfunctional. I think it's broken in many countries around the world. And COVID is really showing some of the weaknesses, if you want to say, or the fact that the people are quickly losing faith in government and the way government is behaving. And once again today, I've seen some amazing testimonials that are being presented by doctors and researchers around the world, and yet government seems to be in complete denial of wanting to look at these things. But the bigger problem is that our fundamental freedoms of freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, freedom to work, have been stripped away from millions and millions of people around the world, and far too many here in Alberta. And we beg Premier Kenny, and people get upset saying, well, you shouldn't beg, you got to talk with authority. And I can appreciate they say that, but we're not in a position where we can talk with authority. All we can do is ask, whether you ask politely or viciously, what there's nothing we can do. We're not the ones holding the control buttons, and so here we are being locked down, being threatened with fines and whatnot. But I want to go back to the two things that I have spoken about over and over about the problem of democracy. And first of all, I just want you to let you know that I believe in a constitutional democracy that recognizes the supremacy of God and the rule of law. And without those two foundations, democracy really is a mess. But there's a couple of problems that we have, and in that constitution, I believe the first and foremost reasons why people come together, why they form government, is to protect the individual. We know what it's like where there's anarchy, where there's no law, and it's ruled by force. He who holds the gun makes the decisions, or he who controls the army, or the band of looters, whatever it is. When there's no law, it's Machiavellian, and he with the most power rules. And so you need to have a constitution, and that constitution's primary purpose is to protect the individual, that individual's life, their freedom, their property. And that property starts with their own body, themselves. Everybody has property in themselves. And then their pursuit of happiness, to be able to go out and to try. And I've often been said, you should be allowed to actually die trying. And historically, many of the breakthroughs that have happened have been people putting their life on the line. Whether that's Columbus, and he headed out to find the new world. Galileo, I mean, he never lost his life, but excuse me, he basically, was put in prison and house arrest for years because of his new ideas. And we can go through it over and over. Dr. Marshall, I have a great deal of respect, and recently is, 1980, 82, 83, came up with a declaration on what was actually causing ulcers, and he was just vitrified in the health industry and in medicine. And it was years later, not till 2005, that he and his co-worker were recognized and won the Nobel Prize. And we've seen the drug ivermectin win the Nobel Prize. But what I'm saying here is that our fundamental freedoms are not being protected, not only here in Canada, but in many of the democracies around the world. And the government has shut down speech, the gatherings, couldn't hold a conference and get together with the experts on what to do with COVID. And to me, there's two fundamental problems that we need to address in that. One is accountability, and the other one that we're seeing because of COVID is unprecedented spending. No cost benefit analysis, no outcomes. They're just throwing money, dollars after dollars. Is there any long-term benefit? Is there a cost-benefit analysis? Are we going to have anything out of this? And I say no. We're jeopardizing our children's future. And so, what can we do about it? Well, Premier Kenney here in Alberta has promised a referendum next fall. He wants it on equalization. It's funny that just what was that, a week ago, he was whining, and our finance minister was whining, saying that we went to Ottawa, we calculated it all out. We have a very good case that they should be sending us $6 billion in transfer payments, $6 billion. And what did they end up getting? I think that it was 700 million, but again, I don't have the numbers in front of me right now. But anyway, some people said it was 20 cents on the dollar. I think it was more like 10 cents on the dollar. But bottom line is that we're going to get nothing from it. And he wants to have a referendum in a year from now, when we're talking $6 billion a year. Why wouldn't we have the referendum now? He put out his year end, and I guess our finance minister did, and talking about the great things that they're doing, pressing for a fair deal for Alberta, and said that they're going to look at having our own Alberta Revenue Agency. They're going to look at having our own pension plan. They're going to look at having our own immigration policy. They're going to look at all of these things and then discuss it. When you're losing, $6 billion in transfer payments, and I would say historically we've been losing $20 billion a year, we don't need to look. And so I don't know what his plans are or what his strategy is, but I totally disagree with it. We need to act, and we need to act decisively. And we need to create the Alberta Revenue Agency, and we need to create our own police force, which again, they're studying and looking at the benefits, when yet they're spending billions of dollars with no cost benefit analysis, when we know these are causing us problems. And so this brings me to what I really want to talk about today, is accountability of government. And what do you do with a government when they're in power? They have a majority, and we're handcuffed. And so what we have to have, and it should be in every constitution and every free country in the world is democratic, is accountability through recall. And what is recall? Well, recall for me, I define it very simply, is that 50% plus one of the total number of people who voted in the last election were to sign a petition and say that they want to fire or recall that elected individual, then there'd be a new election. They'd be recalled. There'd be accountability to the people. And so in quick, easy numbers, if 20,000 people voted for an MLA, it would take 10,001 signatures in order to fire that MLA. We could actually be out right now demanding accountability, and we could do that by going, well, actually, they wouldn't even let us go door to door, so I'm not sure how we'd collect the signatures. Kind of interesting what they can do to shut us down. But bottom line, we need accountability through recall. And without that, you have tyrannical governments. And again, I always love the old quote, tyranny by the majority is no better than tyranny by the one. And that's what we're currently living under, the tyranny of a health official and a premier that says that we're shutting everybody down, that we want to shut down. And it's pitiful to me. I saw an incredible picture last week that I thought was probably the best of all, in response to young Ocean, who was arrested for skating on an open rink with his friends and family. And then another individual was standing in line at Nakiska with a picture and says, "Thank heavens I have skis on. If I had skates, I'd be arrested." And my point is that it's so arbitrary. It's just ridiculous that an idea comes in their head that, well, yeah, no outside skating, but no problem to line up with scads of people at the mountain and then to go skiing, and we don't need to worry about tracing or anything happening there. And I agree that it is more remote, but why were a few kids on a pond, one arrested and fined and charged? And my point is, it's just arbitrary government decisions. And so recall, what would recall allow us to do? Well, I think you'd be amazed at how many Albertans would actually say that, we're not going to sit here and do nothing anymore. We'll breach the mandate, the edict that's been sent out that we can't do anything, and we're going to collect signatures to fire a few of our MLAs, and it would solve problems. But when it comes to democracy, the two things that are really causing problems around the world is, one is the uncontrolled spending, which should be in the Constitution, that they need to balance their budget, and two, the accountability through recall. There's many others benefits that go along with that. And I want to talk about a few of those for a few minutes here this morning, and what we can and should be doing. But one of the problems in democracy is the bitterness and the division that we see political strategists thrive on. They want to point out something bad or something different, and they crunch the numbers, they do the research, they do the polling, they might even have focus groups to get the best way of messaging it, to get people emotionally charged, and do this, and we become very bitter because the majority rules, the majority votes. Like, for example, we could even have a vote right now saying that the majority of people think that we should be locked down, and so they can impose that on those risk takers, the Columbuses that want to venture out and carry on with their living. And so when you have that majority rule, it's very problematic. That if the Constitution protected the individual and their freedom, it would change things dramatically, and allow for us to work through these situations in a peaceful way. We wouldn't need to be protesting for our freedoms and being committed to trying to gain our freedoms back, to associate, to speak, to worship. All of those things have been stripped away from most Albertans, and it's problematic. And so one of the other benefits of recall is the fact that if you're really upset and you think that the government or the elected person is out of line, you go and you start door knocking and talking to people, or advertise and say, I'm going to be at the Superstore parking lot gathering signatures. Please come by and sign them. You really come to an awakening when you realize that people won't do it. You talk to them at the door, and they say, "No, I'm actually happy with the lockdowns, and not going to sign that." Or I'm happy that they're shutting down businesses, the restaurants and the gyms and the hair salons. That I'm happy with that. And so one of the great things about people is that when we're not together and we don't talk, we can become very angry, very upset, and very partisan. But when we're in a group and we start talking together, it's amazing how often we can come to an agreement and agree to disagree. And that's one of the benefits of recall, is that rather than having such a divisive group of voters, we can actually have people that realize that, oh, wow, the majority of people actually want our taxes to go up. I thought they needed to balance the budget this year, but when we went out to try and recall the individuals, we found that people, they actually wanted that. And so you appease yourself with the fact that you realize that you're not the majority. Another very important part of recall, and one that I've been pushing for some time, though, is when a government gets elected, and whether it's Rachel Notley or Jason Kenney, they all of a sudden have this idea that every thought that was ever in their head, not even that they've shared publicly, they think they have a mandate to exercise that, and there's just no way of stopping them. And nobody that I know of would ever hire somebody on such a flimsy resume, and with a flimsy business proposal on what they're going to do, and say, here's the keys to my business, here's the credit card to my bank account, and here's the authority to sign over the mortgage on my property, whatever else, for 4 years. And in 4 years, I'm going to reevaluate and see whether or not you're doing a good job and what I'm desiring you to do. We just categorically know that if we did something like that, it would be a disaster with no control buttons. One of my good friends often says it's like buying a car with no brakes. Might be fun for a little bit, but it's not very long before we realize how critical brakes are in order to have control of your vehicle. And we have no brakes on government. For 4 years, they're unfettered. They can do what they want. They have a majority, and they can pretty much do what they want. You just look federally with a minority and bump along and continue to do harm to the people. But we need to have recall. It's just paramount, and I hope that Albertans will get on board and push hard to get people demanding to have recall next fall in our referendum. We just need to have it. It's vitally important. We need to have control of our individuals. And another benefit of recall is the fact that all of a sudden, as the leader of the party, you all of a sudden realize is that, you know what, I don't actually have authority over this person. I'm not the one who hires and fires them. It's actually the people. And so what you get to do is have that freedom of your elected representative, because they can say, well, my people are demanding that I talk about health care and the fact that we don't have what we need in our town, and we want to change that and demand those changes. And so we really, if we're going to have elected representatives, they need to be accountable to the people who elected them, not the leader of the party and the party whip that punishes them if in fact they don't toe the party line or the leader's line. And so recall actually does two things. It takes the pressure off the leader by saying, well, I'm not actually responsible for Paul Hinman. He's responsible to the people of Calgary Glenmore. That's who elected him. And if those people expect him to talk about those things and make those presentations, that's the purpose of an elected representative. And the other one is, though, is that it makes the individual accountable, and he just doesn't toe the party line because the people are going to recall him. And they told him that, you know, if you toe the party line on this idea that we're going to increase taxes, we're going to recall you. And so you get the benefit of actually having people that represent those electorate that put them in there. And those are a few of the benefits that are there. The other one that I really feel is important, and again, is the number one question that I'd have to say when it comes to the democracy and a new party, and we're getting lots of kickback from the solid Tory or UCP supporters saying, oh, this is a mandate for Rachel, she's going to get in there. We're going to split the vote. Well, if you actually have recall and we were to split the vote and 62% voted for the Widlrose and the UCP and 38% voted for Rachel Notley's NDP, you could actually stop them by having recall, and you don't have to have a 4-year mandate. And so any leader who's truly cares about the damage that can be done. And again, we're so caught up with that in today's world of where we've got all these safety laws and equipment and everything else, but yet we have no safety valve for our democratic process. What it is every 4 years. And so recall actually provides that safety valve that when things are going wrong, we can stop those individuals. And that's critical on what we really need to do, is to have that accountability to stop that damage. For example, with the carbon tax, you know, Rachel didn't talk about it, but yet she imposed that and says, oh, it's going to give us a social license. We could work on our federal MPs that aren't able to speak out against the Paris Accord. And, you know, it's interesting that the last two federal leaders, as soon as they got in the first week, they basically both demanded that their MPs vote in favor of the Paris Accord. And that's the hammer that they're using to pound our industry, to shut it down here in Alberta, is we've got to meet these CO2. Well, what is it that Jason says is that they're, I can't even think of how he says, you know, that, well, they're just they're goals that we're not really going to do it. Well, we continue to get shut down on that, and there's nothing we could do. But if we could recall our MPs because they voted for that, or our MLAs because they support Jason and saying that we've got to do better on our environment, we have world-class environment standards. We have world-class labor laws. We respect human rights better than any place on the planet, in my opinion. And I think in many others, people who live other parts of the country. So recall really is one of those foundational pillars that we need to implement into a constitution here in Alberta to protect Albertans. And Premier Kenny, we really want you to put it on next fall's referendum. It's 11 months away, to allow people to vote and say we want accountability of our elected people. We don't think that they should have 4 years of majority tyranny and impose their ideas on us as Albertans and strip away our fundamental freedoms. But I think that's all I have to say today on that. This is our first broadcast on policy. We're going to continue doing policy broadcasts so people know and understand where the Widlrose independents stand on these things. And I guess it says if anybody has a question on this, please put it in the comments section. I don't know that we received any. And so, I guess I don't have my comment section open. Let's see here. If recalled, would a candidate be allowed to run again? Well, excellent question, Doug. And yes, absolutely. That just because someone was recalled, maybe what they're trying to do is to stop a policy. And we need to allow people to put the brakes on different things and stop them. But that doesn't mean that we don't want them in there. It just means that we want to stop that policy. And so that's the great benefit of recall, is that the individual can run again. But even more important, when you actually go to Elections Alberta or the Election Act and go to go through the process of getting it registered, you might be surprised how fast elected people, politicians, will backpedal. We didn't realize that this was so controversial. We thought this is what everybody wanted. We'll table that for now, and we'll wait later to see if, in fact, we'll talk about it more, but we're not going to pass that legislation. And so you can actually stop a lot right off the start, because politicians are really what I call nervous Nellies. I love the analogy. I don't know how many of you have watched gymnastics and the young women on the balance beam, but it's phenomenal what they can do on a 6-inch beam that's 36, 48 inches off the ground. And I always say to people, it's easy to walk on 6 inches on the ground, put it up 4 feet, and then try walking on it, let alone try and doing a pirouette or change directions. But then put that up 100 feet and see who can walk between two buildings that are 40 feet apart on a 6-inch beam, and we lose our nerve. And politicians are that way. They're very nervous if they think that the people are wanting to recall them, and they're very astute or sensitive to what their needs are. And so recall would have a great benefit of stopping a lot of bad legislation almost as the day after it was announced, because the people would actually start writing in and calling in and say, if you bring that forward, we're going to start a recall petition and then stop that. But maybe we can ask the next question here. Would a Wipa member have to follow the party lines in all cases or freely vote on the issues? Absolutely. This is the benefit of recall, is it actually takes the pressure off the individual and the leader and say, we believe in accountability of our elected representatives. And free votes for me would be on everything, including the budget, which a lot of people just go crazy over. You got to have confidence in the budget. No, if the MLAs think that the government is spending money ridiculously, they can vote down a budget, and then you'd have a second vote on the confidence of the government. And so recall, you need to be able to have a stop. It's not a demolish or destroy. It's a break. It's a stop. And so even the budget, if you're going to have a $10 billion deficit, and the MLAs know that this doesn't fly in my area, they can stop the budget from going through by voting against it, because they're voting for their elected representatives. So absolutely free votes on everything except for a confidence vote on the government. And this idea of omnibus bills and things where they bring a whole bunch of stuff together is just draconian. It's a democratic strategy in order to scare the majority, because their one item that's important to them is in there. and it's just wrong. And so you don't want omnibus bills, but you do want those single issues, and again, recall allows that. Another question here. So just to make sure that yes, free votes always, it's the break that we need to have to stop government from imposing their crazy ideas or their personal beliefs on us, and so each person needs to have that free vote always. Would an independent Alberta create its own currency? Well, I appreciate the question. I think that's a long ways down the road. We would certainly look at that, and that's kind of like asking today, where would we want to go on our holiday? Well, where can we go? When it comes to currency, the world is changing. You got digital currency that we could create. We could say that we're linked to the Canadian dollar. We could link to the US dollar. Heavens forbid, in 2.5 years, the way the world's going, the Chinese Rimney is going to probably be the dominant currency in the world, the way they're full steam ahead. And so I think it's very premature to say we're going to have our own currency. We'd be in a position as an independent country to choose that. And again, with blockchain technology, who knows where we're going to be, or whether we're just going to create our own and back it with silver and gold and precious metals. There's many options, and it's certainly something that a lot of people are studying and debating over, but it's too early for me to say whether or not we'd have our own currency. But thanks for the question. I think that's all the questions that we have today. David, is there anything else? I'll just switch to the private chat here and see if there's anything else that we need to cover, but I appreciate you tuning in. Please share this. And again, we need breaks on government. We need to have accountability of our elected individuals, and the only way we do that is with recall. And I guess we're going to see you, what today is, Tuesday. We'll do one more tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, and hope to see you then. But thank you very much, and please share and like, and let's talk about the different policies of the Wildrose Independence Party of Alberta, and make sure that Albertans know that this is a party that's there for Albertans, and we're going to put the individuals first. We'll protect their life, freedoms, property, and their pursuit of happiness. But take care, and we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow.